I literally just made it on time. Hi. Really, I drove, like I had the biggest mess up this morning with the car that I was renting. It didn't start. So I had to get a friend who was up early enough to actually lend me a car. And then I drove to the wrong hotel because I thought it was at Langesundbad. And then I ended up here and the parking didn't work. So I just got here on time. So yes, I'm here to talk about the fashion industry, but I'm here to talk about how the fashion industry has become this massive monster. It was said in the introduction that in 2015, the industry produced 100 billion items of clothing for 7 billion people. Needless to say, the global fashion industry is massive and extremely wasteful. What happened is that we were pairing the elitist fashion system with the commercial clothing industry, which in effect created this huge expense of clothing. And we have today been trapped in this paradigm of accessing fashion and clothing to the extent where we don't actually need it anymore. Because fashion is not necessarily driven by a need or a practical use. It's also very much embedded in the way that we want to appear. So fashion is valued from our perspective as human beings as much as it is the practical reasons why we wear clothing. So it's a very complex situation. So the new textile economy is what we're looking at. And the system is broken. This whole linear way of producing items of clothing is broken. We need to come up with new models to be able to change the industry radically. All right, let me just see how this works here. Okay, so I work for something called the Norwegian Fashion Hub, which is a cluster supported by Norwegian Innovation Norway and SIVA and the Research Council as part of the Norwegian Innovation Clusters program. And we have a big task ahead of us, and that's to develop an industry in Norway when the changing paradigm is so important. So we need to work with the fashion companies, having them understand that technology, sustainability needs to be at the core of their business model. I am presenting some facts for you today, which comes from the Business of Fashion, which is a yearly McKinsey roundup of 500 top executives, companies, talking about giving insights into what the industry is like. And this is the first time that we actually see, in the 3 years that this has been going on, this is the first time that CEOs are starting to look proactively at the huge challenges ahead and looking at the opportunities to come. And this model here shows you something very interesting, and that is that 96% of the total industry is represented by 20 companies, and these companies are listed here. As you can see, Inditex Group at the top alone has a net value of $4 billion. Now, these are companies which are incredibly interlocked into this global manufacturing system. And it's really difficult for these companies to just stop doing what they're doing and come up with new ways of manufacturing. However, we see that there is a change going on, but this is not happening quick enough. As you can also see from the numbers here, the industry is predicted to grow 50% towards 2030. Now, the fashion industry produced 100 billion items of clothing in 2015. And the current linear practice account for over 500 billion in lost revenue. Consumers waste 460 billion yearly, And 77% of the fast fashion segment are women under 21. 71% of these don't realize that there is a connection with their own consume and sustainability. They understand this to a certain degree when it comes to food and other consumer goods, but not when it comes to fashion. So there is a huge opportunity here to change. But clothes are also a way of choosing your identity. It's also a way of using your value when it comes to consumerism. So we see a very strong shift in purchasing power. Now, consumers worldwide have expanded their scope to not only buy what they want to buy, but also understanding that it has some implications. So that's the good news. So billions of people are using their purchasing power to express their deeply held beliefs. Now, what we understand is that if consumers are moving in a certain way, there is a dire need in the industry to change. And the technology that's coming ahead, we think that blending design and consumer research is the key point of departure for a sustainable process. So, it's all about the power for the consumer. Social media enables trends to established by consumers as opposed to retailers and editors. So we see that there is a pull effect into the market rather than a push effect. It used to be designers who had a vision, designing a piece or a collection coming into the market. Nowadays, it's about consumers deciding what they want, and through social media, they can actually then inspire brands to produce clothing. They can produce collections that are actually driven by their need and their want rather than their presumption. It used to be that the fashion industry could predict. It was a linear system that could predict ahead what was to come, the trends to come. That system doesn't work anymore. So what we have to do is look into the technology that can make consumers' needs, their wants, and the production system set up through new digital tools, design tools. So you can see also this is a shift in the mindset when it comes to the big top companies. 78% of sourcing managers believe that sustainability will be a key purchasing factor for mass market apparel consumers by 2025. Now, this also means that we need to start looking at different manufacturing systems, moving manufacturing back, nearshoring setups. Now, this is also a big part of enabling the transition into a circular economy. So to optimize the apparel production model effectively means nearshoring. And this has also got obviously a very big downside because it means that almost 80% of normal garments can be automized. So that means that there's going to be a huge shift in the global order of manufacturing. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So this is not just a straightforward thing. Sorry. But let's talk about the technology. Let's talk about what's coming. If you can see this app behind me, this is one of the new technologies ahead. This is a digital body scanner that you can use on your phone. So this means that you can add your sizing, you can add your posture, and this will then automatically be able to connect to brands that will be able to then supply on-demand manufacturing production. And this is then where we can enable, with the digital design tools, how these measurements are put into effect. So what you see here on the right is a design program. This is a Korean software developer called Klo. This is a merging of design and gaming. It comes from something called the Marvelous Designer. And what's happening here is that the garment is actually being designed on the body, on an avatar, and while it is being designed, as you could see when it was moving, you would get the technical sketches, and they will change. Let me just also show you that again. Is that possible to go back? As you can see, when this garment is being molded on the body, it alters the patterns on the side here. Now this pattern, this technical pattern, can be directly translated into manufacturing. enabling a process where the consumer gets its measurements, gets its inspiration, can collaborate with the brand in order to then create a technical specification that could be sent into manufacturing. When you work in digital 3D avatars like this, you can actually cut the whole pre-production side of manufacturing. So the scope today is designing, working on product development close to home, and sending everything back and forth to Asia. This is obviously extremely wasteful, polluting. And with this type of technology, you actually don't have to produce a garment until the very minute. You can actually pre-produce samples digitally and alter everything, sales samples, before it goes into production, thereby being able to very, very precisely design exactly what the customer needs, and in that way avoiding creating all this waste. This is a campaign from Carlings, which is a Norwegian brand. This is an award-winning actually ad campaign. And what this actually shows is that clothing is moving into another direction as well. It's moving into the purely digital direction. Social media is a phenomenon which has become so great that young people go into shops and they borrow an item of clothing. They go outside and they take the picture of themselves with this item of clothing on, and then they go back in and then they publish this online. Now this is actually a new way of designing and manufacturing clothes only to be worn in social media. So these clothes are not even being produced. And this is a combination of understanding the direction in which society is going. One is the physical item, and the design process will be the same up till the state where it would either be worn as an item of digital clothing in social media, or it would be produced to be a 3D garment as we wear today. So this is a direction which also is enabling a change in the way we consume clothing. Chloe is also developing this, what's called the Spotify of the fashion industry. This is a way for you to put in your measurements, and this will then correspond with brands that can manufacture on demand. So in reality, you will be able to put in your measurements. You will be able to shop the styles you want, and then you click and you buy it. But when the linear processes that the fashion and textile industry was dependent on earlier, this actually enables a completely different way of creating a business model. Because what happens, if you look at the traditional process up here, the linear process, you'd go from design to sell, and these would be the steps in order to do so. Whereas now, you shift around on these steps, and you design, present, sell, and then you produce, rather producing midway through. This actually means that we can go from the traditional price model, which is an incredibly ineffective race to the bottom way of doing business, to an on-demand price model where in fact the product would be paid for in advance and it will be produced to your measurements. And then the company and the value for the consumer will only rise in time, as you can see on this model. Now, all of these technologies combined with digitization, social media, the way that society is changing, enables a great transition into a new textile economy. I attend lots of conferences like this around in Scandinavia, and what strikes me is that most of the conferences are very focused on the problem rather than the solution. In my understanding of the way that this technology is developing, I see this as a huge opportunity for the textile and fashion industry to change behavior and to use this technology to handle big data, to then design business models based on actual needs rather than on the extremely wasteful presumption model that's existing today. So that's my sort of short presentation and introduction into how digitization is changing the fashion industry. So circular value chains, in my opinion, won't be able to take the problem, go to the root of the problem, rather than just being a system of handling waste, if we don't look at the design process in depth and really take into account what we can do to change the way that we design and produce clothing and products. And this doesn't necessarily have to be limited to fashion. Obviously, this could be used for so many different product groups. But if we're going to be able to do this, we need to nearshore parts of our manufacturing system in order to react to the demands that the consumers have through communication in digital and social media, and the design process then that will enable this whole circular process to actually happen. According to UN, 80% of all decisions are made in the design process. So it makes complete sense to look at circular economy from this point of view. Thank you very much.